Welcome to Australian Hiker, your online hiking resource. We're your hosts, Tim and Jill Savage. This is episode 146 of the Australian Hiker podcast. And in this episode, we're going to be doing something a little bit different to what we would normally do, given the circumstances that we find ourselves in, called COVID-19. We're going to be doing a little bit of an update about people and places and I guess sharing how we're keeping ourselves sane in this really unusual time.
So first up, just a bit of news about some of the people we've interviewed over the last couple of months. And we'll talk about Lucy Barnard from Tangles and Tail. And Lucy and Wombat, last time we talked to them, they were just about to start their journey from Ecuador into Colombia. And certainly they had done that by the time that interview went to air. But now Lucy has found herself landlocked and unable to go anywhere, and she's been in Colombia for a while, and basically not being able to move on. And certainly looking at her post, she said that she may be able to leave where she is, but the issue is that she may be stopped going into the equivalent of the next state, if you like, within Colombia itself. So she's finding herself a bit, as I said, a bit landlocked and not being able to go anywhere. And it's gotten to the stage where originally she was able to take Wombat out for 20 minutes a day for some exercise. Now she's not even able to do that, so she really does have to stay at home.
Yeah, the challenges are really amazing. I mean, it's not just the fact that she has herself who's used to doing a lot of hiking every day and an active dog who's also used to it, and now they can't even do their 20 minutes out. But also, extrapolating that into the future around her visa and how long that will last for and what will happen when that starts to run out and all of those sorts of things. I mean, so the impact on them is pretty significant. I do think, though, that we've just had a bit of a chuckle about one of the posts that she did over the weekend. Maintaining that sense of humour and maintaining that optimism, I think, is absolutely essential.
And she's had a couple of very good posts over the last few days, and she was saying that she's a bit out of it at the moment, and she actually put sliced banana in a coffee rather than in a cereal. So it shows you the mindset she's in at the moment. The other people that we've been following over the last few months has been Mickey and Michelle, and these are the two musicians that have been doing the Te Araroa Trail in New Zealand. And the last time we caught up with them, they were in the process of just about to start their next leg or their final leg of the trip to do their final 700 kilometres to finish off the roughly 1,800 kilometre hike from the top of New Zealand to the bottom of New Zealand. They were going quite well. They heard the news about the lockdown that was being put in place in New Zealand, and rather than staying basically housebound for 4 weeks, which they could have done, and they had some very kind offers to allow them to do that, they ended up driving back to Christchurch and getting a flight back out to Australia just prior to the lockdown took place. The way New Zealand's going at the moment, and I can't remember the exact date, but basically it was wherever you were on a particular night, that's where you had to stay. So one way or the other, I think they needed to find a location, and they just decided they would rather finish off the trip at a later stage than sitting inside somebody's house for 4 weeks and not knowing what was going to happen even after that stage.
Yeah, I was going to say 4 weeks and then what? It's a really interesting time, isn't it? And sometimes we think, I have to stay home, and if you're lucky enough and you can work from home, then that's considered to be a bit of a challenge, not being able to leave your house unless it's essential, like exercise, like going for supplies, and so on. So when you think about people who, really had to think hard about, do I continue, do I stop? Most of us, I think, would probably find ourselves in a much more comfortable, much more fortunate position.
And I think the thing is as well, both Jill and I are working from home at the moment.
That's a joy, let me tell you.
We're both lucky that our employers have provided the capacity to do that, and our jobs allow us to do that. But I know that's not an option for everyone, it sounds like we've got at least another few weeks of this, if not longer. And I think if you are lucky enough to have that ability and you haven't lost your job, because I know some people have actually lost their jobs through this process, really staying at home and having to work is not the worst of it. But it's certainly impacting pretty much every facet of our daily lives.
Yeah, so this has been a really interesting time for me because I've been quite a big online purchaser. It wasn't much for going to the malls and shopping, but I used to run in, look at what was available and then spend my time online and purchase through online. I've discovered that just about everything, with the exception of Panadol, can be bought online. It's okay, we've got plenty of Panadol now, don't worry. But, that's a really sort of interesting thing, and we're even trying to support our local industry by buying local and trying to support local restaurants that previously would never have done home delivery and who are now doing home delivery. So it's a big change, and we're very fortunate and we appreciate that, and we're offering support to family and friends as best we can. And I think, if you're in a similar position, then I'd encourage you to do that too. If you need support from family and friends, you should ask for that and not feel that you're intruding and not feel that, they wouldn't be interested. Sometimes people can't tell that you need help unless you say so. So that's another thing we'd really want to put out there and encourage people to reach out to those who are close to them.
Now, from a hiking perspective, I mean, this really has been a disrupted hiking season.
A non-hiking season.
Non-hiking season. We'd just gotten over the bushfires. We were starting to get back into the swing of things, and then all of a sudden we were presented with COVID-19. I think for us and for me in particular, I had a very well planned out list of hikes, both day hikes up to multi-week hikes for the entire year set in place. And with that, a series of podcasts and a series of interviews based on some people that we were going to interview on trips that we're going to be undertaking this year. And certainly those trips aren't going to be occurring at the moment, and everyone's had to change their plans. Those of you that have been following us regularly on social media would know we had a bit of fun over Easter.
We went a bit nuts, yeah.
And we ended up going for a 3-day hiking trip in our backyard. So it's
interestingly that some people didn't quite notice it was in our backyard, but you can tell because you can see the fence and the compost bins and the clothesline, and yeah.
So it's for us. It was it had for me in particular. I think the last time I actually went for a camping trip. Probably would have been September last year, with the fires and everything else that was going on. That was the last time I slept that we slept in a tent. So
we didn't fit as well as we used to. Let me say that.
So it was a good opportunity to get out and get into a tent. And as luck would have it, we were testing out some sleeping bags, and we had just on 0 degrees Celsius. That's what you expect at Canberra this time of the year. So it was a good opportunity to have a try out and see how things were going.
And in a way, I was quite comfortable with the idea of doing the camping in the backyard and testing the particular sleeping bag that I did test. Because it was so close to the house. Because when I do the write-up, I'll keep it a bit of a mystery, but when I do the write-up, you'll appreciate that there's some really different things about this sleeping bag to the bag that I normally use, and I've described it previously, where, you unpack it in the tent and it just goes boof and fills the tent, and I feel very secure and very warm in my sleeping bag. So testing out a sleeping bag so close to home, meters from home, was actually a good thing to do on a cold night, because at some point I thought, well, it'll be okay, because either the bag will perform the way it should or I will just seek out my warm bed. I didn't do that, so the bag did perform not just what I expected, but I think beyond expectation. So watch out for that review.
I think the other thing as well, it wasn't surprising. I mean, in episode 145, we talked about things to do when you can't get out and hike for whatever reason, not specifically related to COVID. But, one of the things that you can actually do is camp in the backyard. It's an opportunity to try the gear, to see how things are going. You don't necessarily have to travel anywhere to go for a night's camping. And looking through the social media accounts that I follow on, it was amazing the number of people that were actually camping in their yards, and even people that had set up their camper vans and were sleeping in their camper vans in their backyard as well. So,
and if you don't have a backyard, put your tent up on your balcony. If you don't have a balcony, do it in your lounge room. If you don't have a lounge room and you've got a table, do what we used to do when we were kids and put a blanket over the table and use that as your tent. I mean, I think we're in this world where no one could have anticipated things were going to be like this or look like this, and we just need to make the most of it, as well as make it as good as we possibly can with, and I keep coming back to this, a bit of silliness, a bit of humour, and, a little bit of how crazy can I make this?
Now, the other thing I mentioned in episode 145 as an option is start planning for forward hikes, even if this is things you're not going to be doing for many months. And as I've previously mentioned, that I'm planning on hiking the Australian Alps walking track this year. Hopefully, I'm making the assumption that whatever happens with COVID-19, that we will be back to a reasonable normality, whatever that happens to be. And I'm hoping that we will still be able to get out and about at that stage.
Tim's forever the optimist.
I am.
He's talking late this year, so, maybe he's lucky. I don't know.
For me now, it's April. I've got 7 months until I actually my planned start day for this hike, and I've actually normally I'll actually start doing the serious planning about 6 months out, and start doing the physical training seriously about 6 months out. And, because of what's going on at the moment, I've already started that. And I've basically spent today, because I had today off, going through, and I've gone through and planned all my meals for this hike. I've the joy of doing this for the last few years, it's now become a much easier process. I know exactly what I do and don't like. So my meals are all planned out. I'm halfway through planning my rest stops and my night camps. So I think, by the end of April, I will have everything planned that I need. And then it's just a matter of just doing the fitness training and keeping an eye on what we are and aren't allowed to do at that stage.
So, just on that fitness training, that's the other thing. I think we assume that we've learned that we need gyms, maybe most of us would pay the membership for the gym and never go. I'm not quite sure whether that's just me. But, there's all sorts of things you can do in your own house, in your own yard, in your apartment or wherever you are to keep fit, to stay fit. It's good to get outdoors when you can, but strength training is an important part of hiking, and there are all sorts of options, including lots of gyms, including one that we're familiar with, are doing virtual training sessions now. So there's no excuse.
The other thing I'd mention at this time as well is that I know with some of the posts that I've done over the last few weeks, particularly on Facebook, people have questioned about what they are and aren't allowed to do. And it really does depend on the state you're in. Being in Canberra, we are the smallest territory in the Australian Federation. We've got 46% of our land mass is Namadgi National Park, which is closed due to the fires, and they're still having to clear a number of dangerous trees out of the place and out of the way. So we don't have access to that large recreation area. So people have been forced into a much smaller area. And I think we are quite lucky here in Canberra. I know the comments that I've had from people from interstate that some of the restrictions are quite ruthless, and that if you should be staying at home and you shouldn't be driving anywhere unless you've got some valid reason. Canberra is not quite that bad. Certainly, they don't want to see people congregating in groups in public. That's pretty standard across the country. But we are able to get out and about. We do have a number of green hills, ridges and buffers throughout the city itself. We're lucky that we live on the edge of one of these areas, so we can walk to it quite easily. But even for many people who live in the centre of the bigger suburbs, it might only be a kilometre walk to get to those spaces or a very short drive. And all those spaces and all those shorter walks are still available and still accessible to at least the Canberra population.
Yeah, and that is a little bit different from the bigger cities in Australia. And if you're living in the centre of those bigger cities, we appreciate that that's a bit of a challenge. But be creative. Think a little bit laterally about what you can do. Absolutely, stay within the requirements for that particular state. But just think about what's nearby. Think about what's possible, and go with that. One of the things that we did when we did have our big adventure, camping outdoors on the weekend, camping outdoors in our backyard, I keep forgetting to say, just in case people are wondering, was that we also made a bit of a joke and had a bit of fun with exploring our natural and cultural heritage in our backyard. And, I think, Tim, you referred to it as an iron horse, which is a clothesline. Yes, we do have one, but it's very, very rarely used. So it pretty much is a heritage item, I think. And, just had a bit of a laugh and made a bit of a joke of some of the things that we were seeing. But it was kind of nice and kind of fun to get out there and to sort of be a bit creative about what was normally in our environment and what we would normally take for granted.
Now, the other thing I'd mention at this time is the outdoor stores. And again, it seems to be a bit of variation across the country with what's going on. Some of the larger outdoor stores around the country have opted to close, and there's some very well-known ones that have done that, and they've actually gone through and still offering online sales, but you're not able to walk into the store and have a wander around. And I think this is something that, as Jill mentioned, we probably over the last few years we've become more and more used to buying things online. It depends on how urgently we want something, or whether we feel the need that I need to use this afternoon, and I'll go into a store and buy it, or it'll be a few days and it doesn't matter. So I think you will find that online the stores are all doing very well as far as trading, but I think, in all honesty, the outdoor industry is feeling the effect. I think, due to people not wanting to spend money at the moment or having lost jobs, I think the outdoor industry is definitely feeling the pinch. Normally, April, including around about the Easter period, is often when the majority of Australian outdoor stores have their sales, and this year is no different. And there are some very good sales if you go through and have a look. So whether you've got a store that is still open, or whether you're looking at the online stores, if there's something you've been after for a while and you do have the ability to make the purchase at this time, it's definitely worthwhile having a look at.
Yeah, I think I would go a little bit further and say wherever you can, support them. If we want the industry to be there when everything gets back to, I hesitate to say normal, whatever normal is. But if you want them there at the end of all of this, into the future, then we need to support them now. And that probably applies to just about any other business that you engage with. So if you need something, if you can afford it, please seek them out. And the online offerings that have been developed, some over many years and others just recently, are really good, and a lot of people have put in a lot of thought to making sure that their businesses can continue. So all I would say is do what you can to support them.
One other thing that it's worthwhile mentioning here is the outdoor trade shows in Australia, in the US, and the big ones in Europe have basically been cancelled, not just postponed. And certainly for us, we would usually go down and spend 3 days at the Australian trade show talking to wholesalers about new and upcoming product, that we can bring you that information. And unfortunately, and understandably, that won't occur this year. But it's interesting to see that the industry as a whole is taking this seriously. So there'll be a lot of soft releases, I suppose, that products will come onto the market, and there won't be a huge amount of social media around them like there usually is. So it's worthwhile keeping an eye on both online and in your local stores to keep an eye on what new gear is coming through. Okay, now in relation to the Australian Hiker podcast, as I mentioned in the last episode, I had a very well set out list of episodes planned for the entire 12-month period, and there's always a bit of leeway there somewhere. There's something amazing happens, or I come across something that needs to be talked about sooner rather than later. I have the ability to move things. But I actually had booked in a series of interviews with people who are going on overseas trips throughout the year, and obviously that's no longer happening. So we lost a number of episodes, at least this year, in relation to the podcast. I also had a number of episodes planned where I was going to be focusing on longer, and I do say longer day hikes and multi-day hikes that we were going to be doing this year. And again,
there's only so many we can do around our place of home, let me tell you. I think we've almost exhausted them, and we even went for a very boring walk a few weeks ago that, was good to get out and passed away a few hours, but there was nothing to write home about.
So yeah, it's the sort of thing that I have spent the last couple of weeks chasing people down, bringing interviews from later in the year, bringing them forward. I've got a bit of preparation work before I can sort of get the interviews done and get those to air. But I went through and made my plans and rescheduled all the podcast episodes for later this year or for the rest of this year. So I now have a reasonable plan for the way forward, but it will be different than what I'd actually planned at the start of the year. So, but having said that, I've got all these wonderful episodes sitting there ready to go for next year, for when we can actually get out bush. So, it's a bit of a help for next year's plan or later on this year once things do get back to, as Jill said, whatever the new normal is. Okay, so that's all for this week's episode. I won't get too carried away with what we're talking about in 2 weeks' time, and unless it doesn't come off.
Because anything can happen. We've learned that this year.
Yeah, and I think once I get past next week's the episode in 2 weeks' time, I'll be able to, with a degree of confidence, actually tell people what's happening a few weeks in advance. But certainly, we look forward to keeping in touch with you over the coming weeks and months as we all get through this, and we hope that you have the opportunity to get out and about, and at least, if not get into the bush, get around and discover your neighbourhood. We're allowed to exercise, so get out and just have a walk around your neighbourhood.
Yeah, so we just ask that you stay with us, stay interested in hiking, support the locals, explore what you can, and this too will pass.
Okay. One final request, if you can, if you have the opportunity, please go through and give us a 5-star rating on iTunes or Apple Podcasts or the podcast listener of your choice. That just helps us get the message out there and helps us get found. Thanks for listening. That's all for me. Bye for now.
And bye from me.